What's really unique about our book and the research that we've been doing at the Greater Good Science Center is that we've come up with a methodology to teach people how to have profound moments of awe in the ordinary.
Mm,
So you don't have to go to a national park or to be at the most amazing rock concert to have a moment of awe. That you can have a moment of awe right now while we're having this conversation. Incredible data points that support this practice as not just as a, I would say more than just a meditation technique, but really this is a medical intervention. You could think of this as saying, if you do this 3 times a day at least, with looking at our statistics and the significance that we saw, that you should have a benefit with improving your mental and physical health.
Well, hello everyone. This is Al-Mashat, registered psychologist and mindfulness teacher, also founder of the Center for Mindfulness Canada in Vancouver. I'm interested in bringing conversations that support positive change, well-being, and mindful living. And my guest today hits all three. Dr. Michael Amster, I just want to say welcome first to the show. And
Thank you very much. Such an honor to be here.
Thank you. It's a real treat. And you know, your bio is so humble. I'm just going to go over it, but it's so humble. You know, you bring so much to the table. So I'll just read your bio so those who are not familiar with your work can be up to speed. Dr. Michael Amster is a physician and awe researcher, writer, and teacher at the UC Berkeley Greater Good Science Center. With 20 years as a pain management specialist, he's currently the founding director of the Pain Management Department at Santa Cruz Community Health. A practitioner of meditation for over 30 years. I'm very interested in that. He's also a certified yoga and meditation teacher. He splits his time between clinical work, research on awe, and teaching mindfulness and leading awe-inspiring retreats around the world. His recent book with Jake Eagle it's such a great title, by the way, The Power of Awe. Overcome burnout and anxiety, ease chronic pain, find clarity and purpose in less than 1 minute. Now that's doable, isn't it? 1 minute. We can all do 1 minute. So what
we all have at least 1 minute a day to bring our full attention to something that we appreciate, value, and find amazing. So this is as one of my colleagues, Stacker Keltner at UC Berkeley, who runs the Greater Good Science Center, he said this awe method that we'll talk about today is the future of mindfulness. So this is mindfulness 2.0.
2.0. I know you've used the term microdosing as a way to microdose mindfulness. And I just love that term you and Jake use, microdosing mindfulness.
Yeah.
Little pieces throughout the day. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, we thought about that being the title of our book.
Ah.
Yeah. But we were a little concerned after discussions with our publisher that people might associate our book with psychedelics.
So that's right.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we can begin with, would love to hear all about our research and your background. But first, if we go a little further back in terms of your journey to even meditation and mindfulness, because for me, it was such a huge part of me reclaiming my health, my well-being, my own struggles and suffering 20-something years ago that led me to mindfulness, and then to teach it and offer programs. And so I'd love to hear what led you to even meditation and this path of mindfulness yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to share my story. I feel really fortunate. I just want to acknowledge I had some phenomenal teachers along the way, and I feel like I've had some really good karma along this path. But I even as a teenager was introduced into mindfulness and meditation practice, and the primary way in which it happened is that I was suffering from test taking anxiety. I was one of these kids that was very highly driven and focused, and I actually wanted to be a doctor since I was 3 years old. I was
Oh, wow.
one of those kids in the block that loved playing doctor with my little Fisher Price doctor set, and sometimes got in trouble playing doctor. But um, yeah, I always wanted to be a physician, and as I went along in my education, um, I started developing more
Mm.
anxiety with taking examinations because I
Yeah.
knew sort of the stakes got higher the farther along. And so it was actually towards the end of high school that I started studying
Mm.
mindfulness and meditation, um, and then in college when I was studying for the medical school admissions test, um, I actually had a full-on panic attack. I'd never had something like that before, where I was in the middle of the exam and I got stuck on some verbal passage, and um, I felt my heart race, and I was became sweaty, and I couldn't focus anymore, and I
Yeah.
broke down crying, and I basically like stormed out of the test. I mean, I was just terrified with what was happening.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate to have some friends that had themselves been to some extended mindfulness or meditation Buddhist retreats.
Mm.
And then from that, I did my first 10-day Vipassana retreat when I was, I think, a junior in college.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and then that just changed my whole trajectory of my life. And I mean, it hasn't always been easy. I mean, I've definitely through medical school and taking all these different examinations, I've had to learn to work with my mind, because I it's like the sabotaging technique when you get in those examinations where it's like, I'm gonna mess you up. You can't do this. You're no good. Um, yeah, so it's been
Mm.
a good 30 plus year journey. Of going attending many long Vipassana retreats. And then when I
Mm.
went to medical school, I was very fortunate to have a mentor named Roger Walsh, who's a
Mm.
physician, psychiatrist, and an author of many multiple, spirituality books. And
Mm.
he exposed us to teachers like Eckhart Tolle. This is, 25 years ago, before he was even famous.
Yes.
Yeah. And and then about a decade ago, I became officially a mindfulness teacher. I was trained at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, which is
Mm.
the Vipassana Center in California,
Mm.
um, on the West Coast here,
Yes.
and led a Buddha Sangha for. I started a Sangha and led that for about 7 years,
Mm.
and have taught mindfulness to hundreds of my patients with chronic pain over the years. So
Mm.
it's been a big
Beautiful.
part of my life. Thank you.
Beautiful. And for those who are not familiar with the word Sangha is community. So you really have such a deep background in meditation and from direct experience. And I find that when someone comes to mindfulness with um, like a deep intention of wanting to, come to terms with something, panic, the stress of the exams, the stress of life, work, it becomes very personable and then really supportive.
Mm,
Because that's mindfulness, isn't it? Is how do we relate to the reality in this moment? How do we relate our mind? So, so,
yes.
so that supported you for panic. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things I've really loved about this journey, I think of it as sort of, the peeling of an onion, the layers and layers. And it's I've learned to just be more comfortable with myself. It's sort of you
Mm.
peel off a layer and you go deeper, and then another layer and another layer, and it's just beautiful, sort of this flowering or rising of the true nature of oneself,
Mm.
um, rather than the sort of egoic identities that are really not true, but of who we really are. Um, and actually, the Sangha, the community that I started was an interfaith Sangha.
Mm.
I was really curious to bring conversations about God and
Mm.
and that whole aspect into the study of mindfulness and spirituality. So it was a group that had Christians, Jews, and Muslims. It was a really special group that we would um, really bring in the Abrahamic faiths with Buddhism.
Beautiful. like
Hmm.
the common humanity across religion, and even if someone doesn't follow religion, there's like this humanity we can tap into. It's just beautiful. This
Yeah.
I had this a dear colleague. She just recently we were talking, and she used this term, gathering of beautiful humans, right? Like
Mm,
such a beautiful way of describing beings, gathering of beautiful humans.
yeah.
So I
That
want,
that is awe. You know,
right.
humans are one of the greatest sources of awe.
Mm,
When you look at the beautiful diversity of humanity, of all the different cultures and ways that we, say the name of God, or, the universe or consciousness, the way that we're all connected, it's so truly awe-inspiring.
mm.
Um, yeah.
So what is awe? What would you say as an emotion, or how would you define awe, and why is it important as an emotion?
Yeah. So when I teach about this, I always like to ask, people, what does awe mean to you? And what
Mm,
comes to mind when you think about a moment of awe?
mm,
And for a lot of people, they think about some type of extraordinary experience, right? Where their mind is just sort of blown open.
mm,
Imagine, being at the edge of the Grand Canyon, or watching a spectacular sunset in Hawaii, witnessing the birth of a child, maybe attending the death of someone and watching them take their last breath. These are all these moments that can be profound and quite extraordinary.
mm,
And what's really unique about our book and the research that we've been doing at the Greater Good Science Center is that we've come up with a methodology to teach people how to have profound moments of awe in the ordinary.
mm.
So you don't have to go to a national park, or to be at the most amazing rock concert to have a moment of awe. That you can have a moment of awe right now while we're having this conversation, um, and bring yourself to a state of profound presence, and that sense of spaciousness and timelessness that a state of awe brings us. So when we look at awe from a scientific perspective as an emotion, there's sort
Mhm,
of two aspects in which the researchers define awe uniquely as a positive emotion.
mhm,
So first of all is this idea is of what's called perceptual vastness.
mm,
And so when you have a moment of awe, if you think about that moment, you probably experience that there was some vastness to that experience, right?
mm,
Now, on the outside, it may have been an incredible view or vista, but more importantly is not what happened outside, but what happened inside with you, is that it
mm,
gave you a sense of vastness of your
mm.
internal landscape. Your sense of self diminishes, the egoic self gets smaller,
Yeah.
and you feel connected to the vastness of all life, of humanity, of the universe, of consciousness, of God, whatever you
Mm,
spiritual terminology you want to use, but the sense of self expands.
mm,
And then the second aspect, in how scientists define awe uniquely as an emotion, is this idea of cognitive accommodation. And what that means is
mm.
that an experience of awe shifts our perception of reality. It kind of
Yeah.
just scrambles your circuitry, like, wow, how's that even possible? If you've ever been to Yosemite National Park
Mm.
and you're looking at these sheer granite cliffs that are 3,000 feet, like, how is it possible that these rocks that weigh gazillions of pounds or kilograms are able to stand up vertically? It's just
Yes.
blows your circuitry, like, wow, that's impossible.
Yeah.
um that's what an awe moment does temporarily to our way of thinking and the way we see the
Mm,
world.
mm,
It kind of scrambles our sense of reality. Now, in terms of awe as an emotion, in terms of why we call our book The Power of Awe, and why is awe the most powerful emotion,
mm,
I'm sure we're going to dive into this in the next hour of our conversation. But one of the key things is that awe is what's called a prosocial emotion.
mm,
And it's like a master emotion of all the good emotions. When we have a moment of awe, we
mm.
become more generous. We're generous to strangers. They've done research on this where they've given someone people an awe experience, and people are then more generous to strangers. They're willing to
Yeah.
give more generously. Um, it creates more gratitude,
Mm.
more sense of connection. So a decrease in loneliness. Even though you can be alone and have a moment of awe, but you feel connected,
Yeah.
and not alone. When you have a moment of awe, you expand your view of the world so
Mm.
that you're more tolerant and open-minded and
Mm.
curious. You live life with wonder, and there's more sense of empathy and compassion. So
Mm.
awe is really that master hormone, that it's not hormone, sorry, not hormone, but emotion.
There should be. Maybe this is the 3.0 of
Well,
awe.
maybe there is
There's a little
awe,
hormone injection of awe.
but awe is actually working on a neurophysiological level, and
Yes.
we can talk about what's going on later. But
Yes.
it's not a hormone. Well, oxytocin is a hormone. So when we
Yeah.
have awe, we release oxytocin, which is a hormone response. But um, yeah, awe is definitely the sort of the master of all positive emotions in many
Mm.
ways. And as
Mm.
we know right now, it's getting a lot of attention in the media, and um, we're going to talk about my research that we did at the Greater Good Science Center, but it's really just the start of a
Mm.
big new world of research that's just about to blossom in the world of awe.
There's such a huge area to cover around that. Like it's new and it's really exciting actually. I just want to go back to something. I'm just really curious. You were mentioning about one of the things with awe is gratitude. It gives us, connects us to the sense of gratitude. And is that the doorway? Is awe opening more gratitude and appreciation? Are they similar? Is there any connections between those? Like experiencing awe means you'll be more grateful and more appreciative. And that's even I'm curious, is there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this sort of takes us to a more of a philosophical level.
Mm.
And in our book, The Power of Awe,
Mm.
um, we dedicate a whole section to this model that my co-author and friend Jake Eagle, it's really his life's work. It's what he calls the three levels of consciousness.
Mm.
And so um, it's a model or a framework to see about, like, how we are when we navigate the world. And 99% of the time, we're pretty much living in what he calls safety consciousness. It's sort of the
Yes.
base level of when we're in the world, we're being productive, you know, um, we're like raising our kids, we're at our work, we're paying our
Mm.
bills, we're not necessarily in survival mode, but we're dealing with the day-to-day life stuff.
Mm.
And then the next level of consciousness up is what he calls heart consciousness. And that is where gratitude is. When we're in a place of the heart consciousness, we're in appreciation and in gratitude.
Right.
And I love this as an example, but if you think about, let's say you're driving on the highway, and we're all in our cars and commuting and going places. And when you're in the unconscious level of just sort of the day-to-day safety consciousness, if someone cuts you off while you're driving and they give you the finger or whatever, you're
Mm.
likely to respond back with a similar gesture
Yeah.
of reaction. And that's just because we're on that automatic stimulus and response.
Mm.
And of course, as we know, with mindfulness practice, like we're working on extending that stimulus to
Space.
response, that space, right?
Space,
That
that's
Viktor
right.
Frankl talks about, that space between stimulus and response. But when let's say we're in a state of heart consciousness, we've been focusing on gratitude
Mm.
earlier that day, and we have the residue of that gratitude, and
Mm.
we've been in a state of the heart, and when we're in heart and we're in gratitude, you feel more present, right? You feel a little bit more calm, you're breathing probably slower. In fact, heart math, which I'm sure you
Mm.
know about, and which is
Yeah.
about heart rate variability, and their main technique that they teach is one of gratitude.
Mm.
It's a gratitude practice of cultivating gratitude and noticing how it changes our heart rate variability and our cardiovascular health.
Mm.
But the thing is that the
Mm.
state of gratitude is one that's a mental process. You have to make a list, or you're thinking about what you're grateful for.
Yes.
Awe, the emotion of awe, is one step up on this three level of consciousness, like,
Mm.
ladder. And the highest level in this model is what Jake calls spacious consciousness.
Mm.
And spaciousness, or spacious consciousness, is that state I believe the Buddha is teaching us about going towards nirvana,
Mm,
or in all the major religions, that contemplative practice where we feel time standing still,
mm,
where our thoughts are quiet, we're just purely present, we brought our full attention to the present moment, and we feel at peace.
mm.
Um, and so awe is that state of spaciousness. So it is a different emotion than gratitude. I could think of gratitude in some ways as maybe a doorway, but
Yeah.
ultimately, when you have a state of awe, it doesn't require the effort of thought or of making a gratitude list. But we do have awe moments from what we're grateful for. You know,
Mm,
it's helpful to think about something that we are appreciative of and to use that as something to bring us into a state of awe.
mm.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. So there's more of a visceral, and we'll get into your specific method, which aligns beautifully with awe, three letters. So maybe you can share a little bit about that, this three-step method, which is A.W.E.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about the awe method, and maybe I'll share a little bit about the background and how we
Yes, please.
discovered it.
Yes.
So yeah, so as I shared earlier, I've been a mindfulness teacher for about a decade, and I had Jake Eagle, who's my co-author. He's a psychotherapist in Hawaii,
Mm,
and he's been a mentor of mine for many years. I've attended his spiritual retreats, and someone I've really valued and appreciated for many years. And we had a conversation about 4 years ago, after I attended one of his classes, about how hard it is for our students to practice mindfulness, even just 5 minutes a day. Like, people just don't seem to have the time to do so.
mm.
And we decided to explore if we could create sort of the ideal micro meditation, or we call it now microdosing
Yes.
mindfulness experience. Like, what would that be? What would be that microdose of mindfulness? And he lives in Hawaii. So I flew out there, and we spent a week exploring what this 15-second mindfulness practice would be that would bring us to a state of
Mm,
that temporary state of transcendence, of like the sense of timelessness,
mm,
um, pure presence, thought ceasing,
mm.
a sense of peace, a sense of open-heartedness. And I don't know if you've been to Hawaii, Kasim, but it's an extraordinary place, and it's got a
Yes.
lot of extraordinary awe
Mm.
everywhere. But it actually wasn't when we were out hiking or enjoying the outdoors of Hawaii that I had this what I call an epiphany.
Oh, epiphany.
And an epiphany, yeah. I was making pancakes in the morning for Jake and his wife Hannah, and I poured the batter, and I I've I've made pancakes, I don't know, hundreds of times in my lifetime, and I've never actually poured the batter and just watched it turn
Mm,
from a liquid to a solid. Like, I think most people, you pour the pancake batter, and then you're off making sausage or orange juice or coffee, or you're making your kids their meal breakfast, their lunch for school or something. So we're always multitasking and doing multiple things at
yes.
once, right? We're not bringing our full undivided attention to just the one thing.
Mm.
And I just stood there and I watched this happen. This kind of miraculous chemistry, right? Of a liquid batter turning into a solid, fluffy pancake that is so delicious. And if you think, it's so awe-inspiring. I mean, it sounds really silly, but it's profound in the same
Yeah.
way, right?
Yeah.
Like, that you take these raw ingredients and you mix them together, and then you pour them in a hot pan, and then in a matter of a minute or two, it turns into a fluffy, delicious pastry
Yes.
creation.
It changes form and shape and taste.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
texture and everything about
Yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
taste and everything, like, you're not gonna eat raw batter, it's
That's
disgusting.
right.
But in a matter of 90 seconds, this happens. It's just, and I had this profound, what one might call, we call it an orgasm. I had an
Yes.
orgasm. This
That's
extreme
great.
experience of awe, whereby I
Mm,
had tingles and chills, and my whole body felt alive. So from that moment, we dissected it and realized, well, what was going on here and what this ideal practice we wanted people to learn to cultivate
Mm.
as their microdose of mindfulness was to have a moment of awe.
Mm.
And it wasn't extraordinary awe, but having those moments of awe in the ordinary,
Mm.
which is just so powerful, right? I mean, since
Yeah.
we've been talking, I've had many moments of awe,
Mm.
just being inspired by you, and even looking at the background on your screen. It's just like I'm so awe-inspired by your beautiful background and your plants and your art that you have there. So from this, we developed the awe method. It's this 3-step
Mm.
method that we use. The word awe is the 3 steps. So um, I'll go ahead and talk people through it.
Yes.
Um, so I'm mindful that most people listen to podcasts while they're driving their car. So I'm going to give you kind of a taste of the awe method. I don't want to cause a car accident
Right.
and someone to have an orgasm while driving. But I would definitely recommend people go to our website, thepowerofawe.com, where we have a free meditation resources. And we also offer online courses, and we can download and buy our book, The Power of Awe.
Mm.
So
I'll put all those links as well in the description below, and
great.
so everyone can have access to it. Yeah.
Wonderful. So yeah, let's talk about the practice right now. So for those that are listening, wherever you are right now, you can experience a moment of awe. And so right now I'm with Kasem, and I'm bringing my full, the A stands for attention. So you want to first begin with bringing your full undivided attention
Mm.
to something that you value,
Mm.
appreciate, or find amazing.
Mm.
So I'm looking at this really beautiful background in his room, and I see this tree piece of art that has multiple colors of wood or leaf that look like leaves, and it's just beautiful. So I'm bringing my full undivided attention to that right now.
Mm. So it could be
And then
something in the room that the audience can use. They can use something in the room as an example
yeah, they
for
can
them.
use
Yeah.
something in their room where they are right now.
Yeah.
In it, if you have, it could be, I'm looking at what's here on my desk, but I could have a moment of awe of the scissors on my desk, really. Like,
Mm.
just what an incredible invention and an incredible tool that is, and the people that invented that, and what ease and creativity it brings to my life. So
Mm.
in all of our lives, like a pair of scissors, or scissors are used in surgery, right? And they're
Yeah.
vital to save lives. So anything really can become a source of awe. It's really quite endless. My
Mm.
thermos, my mug here, and this ability to keep drinks warm for hours at a time and keep them delicious and to savor them all throughout my day. So
You made me think of a cup I have here. Well, so much easier than holding water in my hand, right?
right, imagine like you can be in awe of of your mug rather than having
Yeah.
to carry water around in your hand out of a
Right.
stream. And right.
Mm.
So the A stands for attention. We're bringing our
Mm.
attention to just something that we value, we appreciate, or find amazing.
Mm.
And then the W is wait. And we're really gifting ourselves in this moment of a wait. And it's just a wait of 5 to 10 seconds. But if you think about when you're walking with a friend and they open a door and they hold it open for you, and like how good it feels when someone waits for you and they care for you. Well, what you're doing is you're going to care for yourself. You're going to gift yourself a moment of a wait, that gift of a wait. It's really just that part of a breath. It's like really the inhale. It's like,
Mm.
that's your wait. And then the E stands for a deep exhale.
Mm.
And when you take a longer exhale out, your vagus nerve, which is the master of the parasympathetic nervous system, your autonomic nervous system that controls all these different processes of your body without having to be consciously aware of, decreases your heart rate, lowers blood pressure, lowers
Mm.
cortisol, lowers different stress, hormones, and it changes our neurophysiology into a state of rest and restoration.
Mm.
And then the E also stands for expansion.
Mm.
And I think of that expansion as that's that perception of vastness. That's where we expand our identity, our egoic self sort of melting away. You can use your mind's eye and and think of like this energy expanding within you of that what you just had a moment of awe with. And that's often where I get those sort of tingles or chills in my body.
Mm,
That little bit, and it's interesting. I think there's a little bit of sympathetic activation when that happens, which is sort of a nice balance.
mm,
Um, when you have that expansion as well.
mm,
Yeah, and so that's the practice in the nutshell. And then as I was sharing about in our book, we offer 30 extended awe-inspiring practices.
mm,
And our book's been out now for about 2 months, and I've had just tremendous feedback from people where we have one of the practices about having a really mindful or awe-inspiring hug. And
mm.
people who've read the passage then had a hug, and they're like, "This is the best hug I've ever had in my entire life," you know. And it's true, you know, a
Yeah.
hug can be an incredible source of awe.
Mm,
You know, like a real mindful hug where you're that juicy hug when you're really feeling that person close to you and like the heart to heart connection, and you're feeling their warmth and their aliveness and their breath, and you're getting sync and rhythm with their physiology. It's just
mm.
it that can be an orgasm right there.
That's how different that is from sometimes it's very like a to-do thing, like, oh, just a little tap, tap,
Yeah,
tap,
the little
hug.
tap tap tap
Yeah,
tap
yeah, hello,
tap.
hello, good to see you, right? And then move
Yeah,
on. So
right.
actually really getting into it. So, you know, you were describing the three-step process, and I had a couple of questions, and maybe you can guide us through just a 15 seconds of that, so someone can kind of listen to the actual meditation of it, the 15-30 seconds. But I have a question for you. When you mentioned the weight, um, is the weight the sense of feeling in your body, connecting to your body, like being present in that moment? Is that what you mean by weight? Like just registering the moment, like intentionally going, yeah, I feel it here, here, like staying in it. Is that what weight means?
Yeah, I think you know, I've shared with some people that the wait is it's like a chance to marinate, like a marination
Mm,
experience of
yes,
letting us really soak in that pure presence that we're bringing our attention to. So
yes,
yes, it's noticing maybe where you feel in your body and your physiology, or you noticing your mind like really slowing down for for just those that cycle of a breath. Yeah, so that's really what the
beautiful,
wait is about.
beautiful, beautiful.
You know what and I know that you can resonate with this as a mindfulness teacher as well, but
Mm,
I mean, I've taught this to hundreds and hundreds of people, different Buddhist practices and,
mm,
you know, breath practice, body scan awareness practices. And my experience is that a lot of people have a really hard time with developing a sustained practice. Their mind is racing, it's all over the place. And then when they can't focus and they defeat themselves, they kind of beat themselves up like I'm no good at this. This
mm,
is too hard. And I think I'm not trying to be negative on traditional mindfulness practices. I think they're important, and there's
mm,
something about that's beautiful and valuable of a long extended practice period of, let's say, sitting for an hour and really getting to that deeper state of presence and that mind calming down. But I just know for a lot of people it's a really hard thing to do,
mm,
and often it can be sort of a self-defeating practice. So what's beautiful about this awe method is that anyone can do this. I mean, even if you
mm,
are somewhat neurodivergent and you have you know, ADHD, and your mind goes at a million miles a minute, which my father's that way. You know, my dad has adult ADHD, and you know, he's shared with me sometimes like I feel like my mind's going in 100 places in a minute, and he can even do this. Like he can just really actually bring himself to the present moment for a cycle of a breath,
mm,
and have a moment of awe. And it's really sweet to watch him because he'll like, you know, get all excited and he'll like take that breath in and like have that long breath out, and just really I'll see it like energy release from his body in that moment of awe. So what I
mm.
really love about this practice is that it is easy. I think of it as effortless. In fact, from our research, what we know is when people try really hard to do this, it actually impedes their ability to experience a moment of awe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When they
People,
over effort.
yeah,
Yeah. You know, it's so interesting you say that because one of the things that really made me fall in love with mindfulness is I came from a very kind of traditional meditation, which, like you said, long hours and intensive. And when I came across mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, it really made me fall in love because I realized it's not as much as about the sitting meditation or the movement, it's about bringing it to daily life. And that's what inspired me to kind of teach this work is whatever you think your mind is at, we can work with the relationship with your mind. And it's so true. Sometimes it can be so discouraging when people look like, oh, I have to sit for an hour and then my brain doesn't move. I failed. So I love this what you've really what you and Jake have created because it makes it even more accessible and
Mhm.
people can add more ways to be present, including this awe method. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, can you guide us for like a 15, 30 seconds where just with you have such a soothing voice. You really do. And the way you describe it is so clear. Just and I can use something here on the table and maybe I'll be your guinea pig, even though you've practiced this so many times. But for people to hear what my process is as you guide, what do you think?
Sure. Yeah. So I invite you to just take a moment
Mm,
for yourself, and we're going to bring our attention. So this is the A in the A method.
mm,
Bring in our full undivided attention to something that you value, that you appreciate or
mm,
find amazing.
mm,
So maybe it's something in the room that you're in right now, or a memory that you have of someone that you love or of your pet. And just to bring that and hold that in your awareness.
mm, mhm,
And then the moments of waiting, the W, wait, is giving yourself a gift of really soaking in your full attention and honoring that memory or that object of awe that
mhm,
you are welcoming into your life. And then I want you to take a nice inhale in and a longer exhale out. And just fully exhaling. Ah, you can even say the word ah.
ah,
And then allowing that to expand and letting it really fill you up and even getting bigger than you, your physical body, as though you could maybe imagine a light in your mind's eye expanding into a light beyond your physical form and feeling a sense of vastness and connection
mm,
to all life on this planet, to the vastness of the universe, to an awakened, peaceful, loving consciousness,
mm.
a pure presence. And then gently open your eyes and just noticing how you feel. How was that for you, Kasim?
That was surprising in a very pleasant way. And I'll tell you what I chose, which is a little tissue box, just a tissue box. I looked here, whatever is a tissue box. Um, when you guided just to connect, be present, pay attention right here, and feeling the weight the way you guided, kind of reflecting about what this means for me. And actually, it brought moments of joy in my life where tears of joy have come down on my face, tears of sadness. And from there, I actually started thinking about others on the world. I'm thinking there's like millions of people right now using a tissue for tears of
Mm,
joy and sadness. And it's like connecting when you describe the vastness, I really felt like, oh, this kind of brothers and sisters out there on this
mhm.
planet. So connection. So really felt the spaciousness. Um, I could feel I'm breathing deeper. Uh,
Yeah.
and I couldn't help. I don't know if it showed in the camera, but I was smiling on the inside. It was just like
Mm,
felt this warmth throughout the body. and an easefulness just in my kind of my head, my face. Um, and it was so quick, boom, and just expanded.
Yeah. So did you feel like you went to that state of a little bit of timelessness, of
Mm.
pure presence, of calm, of
Mm.
like a deep peace?
Yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Yeah.
And what you're describing is just kind of outside of the narrative mind. I know we didn't speak about it this way, but the mind of,
Right.
I got to do this, I got to do this, the default network in the brain, right? Which is, I
Right.
got to do this. Why didn't I do this? I should have done this. Blah, 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 like all the constant busyness, mind just that suspended in the background wasn't here. Not even what question I want to ask you. Like none of that. Right?
Right.
Like I was just like, the rest of humanity and tissue and
Uh, well, this is what's so beautiful about this
Mm,
practice, right? So we can be, you know, I teach this to doctors dealing with burnout. Actually, that
mm.
was one of our groups of people we studied in our
Oh,
studies. We should talk about the studies for a few
please,
minutes.
yes,
We'll go
yeah.
there,
Let's do that.
but this is such a powerful practice. If you think about the practice of medicine, or if you're a psychotherapist, you can really profoundly shift your state of consciousness, your nervous system, to
Mm,
a state of deep, powerful relaxation in a matter of 15 to 30 seconds.
mm,
And then so that you can do this, let's say in between a patient visit, as most doctors, we get 15, 30 minutes per patient visit. So it's something I can do. I can walk out of the room. I can have a moment of awe before I walk into the next room, and I just really clear
ah,
myself out. And I think that this is a real wonderful tool for helping with burnout, because part of what
yes.
contributes to people's experience of burnout is that kind of collective residue that you carry with you all throughout the day, after patient after patient after patient. It starts to really feel like you're sort of trudging through the mud.
Mm,
But what happens when you do this practice is you clear out, the metaphorical mud, so to speak, and you just come out with a clean slate, and you're like, okay, I'm
mm,
ready for the next patient. In fact, what even better is to have a moment of awe with your patient. And often I start a lot of my patient visits with like, share with me a moment of your awe so that you've had since I last saw you.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and then and I witnessed with you, Kasim, that your physiology completely shifted.
Mm,
Um, I noticed your shoulders drop. You were taking deeper breaths. Um, uh, it was just beautiful to see. You really entered into that state from, I am podcast host,
yes.
to a profound, moment of presence, of a taste of nirvana, really, so to speak, a transcendent state in a
Mm,
matter of seconds. And now that we're back into podcast host again, but your physiology is still changed. It's like in a reset mode, and it's a wonderful residue you get to carry with you
mm,
throughout your day. And what we've learned from our research is that the more times you dose awe, these brief
mm.
moments of awe throughout your day, the more benefit you have.
Ah.
Yeah.
And was it in the book you're mentioning, the suggestions at least 3 times a day doing the practice, or more, if you can, but was that in the minimal in a way? Was that?
Yeah. So what we did was we conducted two robust studies
Mm,
at the UC Berkeley Greater Good Science Center, which is really one of the leading research centers in the probably in the world, actually, in
mm,
positive psychology,
yeah.
and the intersection of positive emotions and physical emotional health, that
Mm,
intersection. And so we had recruited about 300 primary care patients at the height of the pandemic in June of 2020. People were really stressed out, struggling with depression, anxiety, loneliness when they were all sheltering in place. Chronic health symptoms were up on the rise. And then we
mm.
also recruited about 200 doctors and nurses, people that were on the
Wow.
front lines of the pandemic and really burning out heavily. I mean, we know from nationwide study of 20,000 doctors that over half the doctors during the pandemic were on severe burnout and ready to quit medicine,
Yeah.
um, which is devastating. So we taught them the A method in a virtual, study. We could do this through Zoom, which is
Mm,
wonderful, and we led the two cohorts
mm,
through this 21-day program of really teaching people how to practice the A method. We did daily metrics and pre and post different
mm,
surveys, and followed and saw that there was, just incredible results from the
Mm.
people that participated in the study. For example, we saw a 35% reduction of depression, um, which
That's a
is
big chunk.
that's a big chunk. That's a
Yeah,
huge, a
yeah,
very impressive decrease of
yeah.
depression, considering we're asking people to practice just 3 times a day, which we know the practice, having just done it, takes about 10 to 15 seconds to really shift your physiology.
Mm.
And we saw about a 25% reduction of people's levels of anxiety. We saw
Mm.
decreases in loneliness, a decrease in burnout. Um, we saw decreases in physical chronic pain, other health symptoms,
Mm.
and an overall sense of improved wellness.
Mm.
So, just really quite incredible data points that support this practice as not just as a, I would say more than just a meditation technique, but really this is a
Yeah.
medical intervention. You could think of this as saying, if you do this 3 times a day at least, and we also know from our research that the more times you do it, the more benefit you get,
Mm.
that you will see, um, with with looking at our statistics and the significance that we saw, that you should have a benefit with improving
Mm.
your mental and physical health. And then that this could lead into a longer conversation about, like, how does this work? Like, what is happening in the body when
Mm.
we have these moments of awe? Like, what is shifting in your physiology? And that in itself is so awe-inspiring of a conversation to have.
What happens internally in all the systems we have? I mean, that's a huge network we have, actually, don't we?
Yeah,
Inside.
well, so there's several things that are happening. I mean, I'll kind of touch on the key points. So first
Mm.
of all, we know when you have a moment of awe and you're doing this technique, you're stimulating your vagus nerve. So, which is, as we were briefly talking about, in our autonomic nervous system, that's the part of our nervous system that is operating without any conscious effort. It controls our breathing, our heart rate, our digestion, and all these vital processes that really regulate our physiology. It it decreases the sympathetic state and improves that rest and restoration state for healing to happen. Secondly, is our default mode network. We know from brain imaging studies, like the parts of the brain that are that self-absorbed, ruminating,
Yeah.
monkey mind chatter part of the brain slows down. So that we're working on training our mind to decrease the the ruminative, self-absorbed parts of our brain, which are often quite counterproductive.
Mm.
Third, we know that, and this is like some of the most incredible stuff, is that awe is the only positive emotion that
Mm.
lowers inflammatory cytokines in our body. And
Yeah.
cytokines are, you can have an awe moment about cytokines. Cytokines are the oldest molecules on the planet that early
Mm.
single cell organisms would communicate with each other about being safe or unsafe. And as we evolved as brilliant multicellular organ system organisms, we still have this cytokine system in our body when all of our cells communicate with each other with cytokines. And in kind of making a big simplification of the model,
Mm.
there's safety cytokines when we feel safe and we're protected, and it helps builds our body strength, or builds our muscle strength.
Yeah.
It's healing for the brain and for our full physiology. And then there's threat cytokines when we're
Mm.
under danger, and it creates inflammation and breakdown of tissue.
Mm.
So these
Which can
cytokines,
also include like the danger, perception of danger, like a challenging email, or it's like, oh, I have to do this. So the even perception of danger, I can see how that could trigger that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we have a moment of awe, they've done the study where they drew blood out of
Mm.
participants after having a moment of awe, and they saw a significant decrease in the biggest, worst of all the cytokines, called interleukin 6, IL-6. It's sort of the
Mm.
master inflammatory cytokine that is implicated in heart disease and cancer and diabetes.
Mm.
Pretty much most chronic illnesses, even depression, is an inflammatory condition.
Mm.
Depression is an inflammation of the brain, and it's related to these inflammatory cytokines. So all lowers our secretion of inflammatory cytokines. And the glial cells in the brain are some of the biggest secretors
Mm,
of these cytokines. And so when we have a moment of awe and we're connecting the right circuitry in our brain,
mm,
physiologically, we lower these inflammation mediators in our body.
mm,
Um, and then also another pathway involves oxytocin, which is the bonding trust hormone, which has a lot of health benefits as well.
mm,
So that's kind of an overview of how awe is working on a neurophysiological level. But
mm,
yeah, it's really wonderful. I just love, and I think you can appreciate this as a doctor of the mind. But when we get to connect the 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 spiritual practice with the
mm.
psychological benefits and the health benefits, and understanding how the physiology and the brain science and neuroscience is all working, it's like, it's orgasmic, really. So
Yes, it is.
for us in this field to really see how what we've been drawn to naturally. Like I love
Yes,
mindfulness, and the practice has brought, so much joy and awakening and consciousness and
yes.
connection and community and ever these beautiful things in my life, sense of
Yeah,
meaning and purpose.
absolutely. And thank you for sharing, the research and the science behind it, because it's not just something that just feels good. Actually, physiologically, it's creating change. And this is really what kept me going myself and mindfulness and an MBSR. It's like, oh, wait, this is creating change. Like, wait a minute, this is not just a feel good thing. And stress, how you describe it as well, in terms of stress, it's not just like oh, you're just feeling stress. We use that word so much. No, physiologically, there's a cascade of negative effects physiologically. So this is intervening on a physiological level, this awe method. So thank you for describing that. Yeah. I'm curious. You've mentioned, in the book, this, I can't remember who you quoted, but how, awe is like the Gucci of emotions. And it just really made me laugh. And I wonder, I can't remember who, again, you quoted, but
It's Michelle Shiota at
yeah,
she used to be at Berkeley as a grad student. Now she's at
yes.
Arizona State University. Yeah, she said, always thought of as the Gucci bag of emotion. You'd like to have one, but you really don't need it.
Ah,
Right. But actually, what we've learned from studies of where they looked at different populations around the world,
mm,
um, people in the United States, and most in particular, are the most awe-starved culture on the planet.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and I think that, and I think this is a good topic sort of as we begin to wrap up, but
Mm.
it's about it. This is a practice for personal transformation, but more importantly, this is a practice that can really, I think, heal the
Yes.
world in some really deep ways. It's not the solution to everything, but it's a big part of, I think, that we're missing and will hopefully change human
Mm.
consciousness.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm curious. One final question that I'm curious about. We've talked anxiety and depression, and I'm wondering about pain. I work as well with a number of people with pain, chronic pain, whether it's an accident, and even dealing with concussion. So I'm wondering what's. I know it's a new frontier, but what have you discovered about? It could be stories from clients or patients you've worked with around pain, concussion, and awe, because that's an area that it causes so much loss as well. Like people lose so much. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in our research, we did measure people's levels of chronic pain. And as you know, I'm a pain management specialist. So this is an area that I'm most, particularly interested in and passionate about.
Mm,
And we did see a statistically significant decrease in people's perception of chronic pain.
mm,
Um, and I'll tell you what I've heard from people, my own patients, and anecdotally, is that particularly when people are having, let's say, flare-ups
mm,
of their pain, when they're having a really bad day, there's often, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but there is the connection to our physiology when we're stressed out, when we're um, not feeling our best selves. Um, our pain is often much worse. And so
yeah.
what's wonderful about this practice is it does take us to that state of the temporary state, the transcendent state of like a nirvana state where our physiology radically shifts. And so I have seen and heard from people firsthand about their experiences of their pain
Ah.
more acutely decreasing, but also with a decrease in the chronic pain as well.
Mm.
I don't have any background specifically with traumatic brain injury and concussion, so I really can't help you with that. But
Mm.
I think our model would explain that it should be helpful.
As well. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, our next big study that
Mm.
we're currently recruiting people for, the study, I'm not sure when this podcast will launch, but we are doing a long COVID study,
Mm.
which, in some ways connects to like a traumatic brain injury in a way. I mean, there's neuroinflammation that's happening with some people that have had COVID and that are struggling with brain fog, fatigue, chronic pain that's now heightened,
Yeah.
sensory motor changes. So we're actively recruiting people to participate in a study, a blinded study where we're helping people.
Mm.
Um, our intervention is around this A method,
Yes.
and you can go to our website and email us at
Mm.
info@thepowerofawe.com for more
Mm.
information, or you can, if you Google UC Davis, which is the
Mm.
University of California, Davis, their study pages website where they list all their active studies.
Mm.
You can look for the positive emotions study for COVID, and it will
Mm.
show up there. But I'd love to send all your listeners that have loved ones or friends that
Yes. Yes.
are struggling with long COVID. We're actively recruiting, and our recruitment will end in the middle of April.
If okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe I can add a link to that as well. And
sure.
I'll do that. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Mm. Well,
But I would love to share a few lines from our book and as a closing,
yes,
which I
please.
which I think might be appropriate.
Mm.
So this is from our book, The Power of Awe, and this is part of our epilogue and the closing. And we were talking a little bit about this, how a lot of what I've shared today is about the personal level of
Mm.
transformation, but this Awe method is really more than just a self-help technique. So I want to read a little bit about that.
Please.
The implications of awe go well beyond personal transformation. Awe touches everything, and perhaps most telling is the effect it has on others. We're wired to attune to others' behaviors and moods. Our nervous system senses the emotions of those around us.
Mm.
Just as being the recipient of a warm smile can lighten our mood, when we're in awe, those around us feel it too. Awe is contagious. And so practicing the awe method is one not so small way we can contribute to the world. In this book, we covered how awe is grounded in science and that a whole body of science supports that awe changes lives.
Mm.
So we have a big symbol crash ending to the power behind the simple practice of the awe method. If practiced frequently enough by enough people, a critical mass, as it were, everyone would experience a significant heightened shift in consciousness. Awe changes us, and when we share our awe, we change the world. How can we be of awe of someone and physically or emotionally harm them?
Mm.
How can we be in awe of the natural world and destroy it?
Mm.
How can we be in awe of life itself and not live as if every day were a miracle? In awe, the tone of every conversation, from the personal to the political, shifts from having an agenda to being open and curious. Our conversations impact how we raise our kids, how we help our aging parents, how we treat our spouse, how we participate in community, how we mentor or supervise people, how we
Mm.
govern a city, and how we lead a nation. We can think of no downside to practicing the awe method because awe is the light, the appreciation of nature and different cultures, the curious and open mind, the generous and giving soul. Even during times of darkness, these days we need awe more than ever. Awe waits you and surrounds you in the ordinary moments of your life, like the view of the stars that fill the night sky. Awe is free and always available.
Mm.
All you need to do is pay attention to what you value, appreciate, and find amazing. Wait, and then exhale and expand. into the unlimited timelessness of awe.
Beautiful. Thank you for the work you're doing, for sharing this truly awe-inspiring conversation. And I'd love to connect with you outside the podcast, in person sometime, whether on this side in Vancouver or in California. And I also want to thank all the listeners for watching or listening. If you found this helpful, feel free to like and share. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to sharing more with you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kasim.